Explained by the Billy Meier contacts, mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Extraterrestrials Part 3 Note. This section generally deals with the existence of various extraterrestrial civilizations, their histories, societies, cultures, behaviors, technologies, etc. An excellent summary of the UFO, extraterrestrial phenomenon, is given by Billy Meier in his article Extraterrestrials, found in Contact Report 257. Drawings and photorealistic renditions of some extraterrestrials may be seen at the end of Contact Reports 830 and 836. A list of extraterrestrials who have contacted Billy Meier can be found at the FIGU website. Contact Report 075.
Over there in the area where I usually go is unfortunately not possible today because some of our friends are exploring everything over there. We do not want to disturb them in the process. However, they have been quite careless in the last few days because they have already been observed twice in their spacesuits, which they have to wear because they are not oxygen breathers in our sense. But your carnival costume-wearing customs have protected them from the attention of the observers, because they were probably of the opinion that they were carnival connoisseurs.
That is interesting. What exactly do they do there, and where do they come from?
They belong to the other groups working with us here on the Earth. They are also connected to our Federation and investigate radiation phenomena and underground Earth shifts that have come about as a result of various inter-terrestrial factors, and that will influence the future of that region.
Do they belong to you, and how big are they?
Their size is 115 centimeter, and of course they belong to us, but they live on a smaller neighboring planet of Era.
Ah, look, Bernadette sleeps in Jacobus's car.
She does not sleep. She just doses.
How do you know that?
Look here. This device, these symbols say that.
One noticed that Engelbert's cat went crazy.
But because of the cat, animals are very sensitive and feel us also when in invisible state. In order to help you, I analyzed Martin Johannes Sorge a little more closely with the technological aids provided by Quetzal.
Contact Report 077.
In certain respects, we are bound by limitations that do not allow us to penetrate deeper into the thought spheres of a life form. Especially in these matters, we ourselves do not have the necessary knowledge, because many forms of human life on Earth are still foreign or incomprehensible to us, primarily the mental forms.
Contact Report 078 Elena. I come from the planet Saturn, which is about 1/3 smaller than your home planet. Seen from Earth. Saturn is situated in the constellation of Lyra, 157.3 million kilometers away from the Sun MEL. However, the planets are not recognizable from the Earth with its still very underdeveloped technology, because they are in another space-time level.
How tall are you, anyway? Certainly no more than 1.5 meters. Elena, 148 centimeters, 4 feet 10.27 inches according to your measurements. Minara, the promise made by me regarding the beam pistol is to be kept today. But now see this weapon here. This is similar to the one with which you once irradiated the young trees and the fir trees. Note, see Contact Reports 63 and 64. This one, however, is much older than that one. Here, The direction finder shows you the target very accurately through this magnifying scope so that you can hit a single needle of a fir tree very accurately over a distance of several kilometers, which you can then test on a tree over there on the hill. The tubular sight scope brings the target as close to you as if it were directly in front of the weapon. In contrast to that, this is a very outdated operating apparatus, which is similar to that of your explosive firearms. To send out the radiation, you must pull back with your index finger, just as it was the case with my weapon. These two transparent containers on the top here contain two different elements which are fundamentally necessary for the creation of the type of radiation. Used together, they create a form of laser beam still unknown to you, which emits a very strong destructive swinging wave, which, however, only destroys a few artificial forms of matter, such as your film material. So you must not use the weapon when taking photographs. If the front and rear element containers are coupled by a pressure on this point, then a combustion radiation builds up, which within fractions of a second and up to a distance of 37.2 km dissolves everything into nothing without leaving any traces of ash. Only the things surrounding the target char and remain behind. If the front container alone is activated by further pressure on this point, then only a tranquilizing effect occurs, which is used exclusively for self-defense purposes, while the combustion radiation usually serves only for work purposes or total elimination purposes, but in extreme cases, if necessary, can also be used, for example, to damage an enemy vehicle or flying object so that it becomes unable to maneuver and thus ineffective. This also applies to weapons, etc. For a very long time now, about 600 years, these forms of weapons are no longer used because our technology has developed much better ones in the meantime. The latest weapon of this type has been reduced to a third of this size, and the function of the activation of the radiation trigger mechanism has fundamentally changed. Thus, the operation of the newest weapons is individually adapted to its carrier, whereby a weapon can exclusively be used only by the owner. The activation of the trigger is now only carried out on a purely mental basis, which is why the brainwave pattern is programmed into the memory of the trigger mechanism of the weapon, i.e., that of the owner. If the weapon is to become the property of another owner for any reason, it must be newly programmed. I designate the bearers of such weapons as the owner, because this is according to your sense and because the weapon is individually tailored to the carrier. Minata. Then, I have finished my mission for this time. On the other hand, we have to leave, because as my device transmits to me, thoughts are directed here, after which someone will arrive here in the next 2 minutes. We must therefore go and also remove the protective cover that radiates around the center.
Contact Report 079.
Through all the time that we are now in contact with each other, I have taken such an interest in all your and others' concerns that a very strong connection has developed out of it, out of which I would have acted differently in certain things than I was promised. You can see from this that I and my people, too, are only pure human life forms, which under certain conditions have difficulty in following certain things. It was precisely in this case that I could not determine with certainty beforehand whether I would fit in with the given rules and act according to the given advice of the High Council, because the attachment to you and your group had become too pronounced in me, which is why I found it more responsible to remove myself from the immediate area of your presence, in order to not undertake any actions for your benefit, either unthinkingly or guided by connecting feelings and other impulses, which I should not do for your own good and progress. As you know, I should not and must not interfere directly in your evolutionary work for the sake of your self-development of these things. So as not to interfere carelessly and out of a willingness to help in your concerns to be dealt with by yourselves, I removed myself from your surroundings and reach. Through this apparatus, I will fathom what ailment has befallen you.
I only poisoned myself with a little sausage, which all of us know.
Now sit here. Your poisoning is not of an easy nature, but already quite serious. As the apparatus here shows, your blood has already been poisoned, and certain cells of the brain have also been affected, which makes your suddenly pessimistic mood explainable.
I say, that is quite normal for meat poisoning.
It is not that natural, because as I see here, it is not a common poisoning, but a far more serious infection from meat parasites. Give me your arm.
What kind of thing is that?
A parasite neutralizer, as Earth humans would say. This apparatus automatically neutralizes all pathogenic or life-threatening parasites in the physical areas of a human life form as soon as this colorless surface comes into contact with the surface of the skin, as it does right now. The time of neutralization is less than 6 seconds for an entire human body, whereby the neutralizer automatically adjusts in a fraction of a second to the physical condition and constitution of the human life form concerned. In the end, the apparatus neutralizes all damage caused by the parasites, or they are neutralized if they are of any material or any other substantial or gaseous nature, which has just happened to you, so you are not poisoned.
That is great. I actually feel squeaky good again.
First of all, I would like to express my deep thanks and praise for all the commitment and efforts of the honest and diligent group members who made the creation of your center possible. Sure, it was very difficult for me and all others to understand all your actions and thoughts, and also all the appearing impulses, etc., but we realized that the beginning of the whole could not be different, and that it corresponds to the usual rules of earthly behavior. It was not easy for all of us to recognize this, because these kinds of manner of thinking and acting were foreign to us in every respect and therefore incomprehensible, which is why we all first had to accustom ourselves to these matters in order to be able to understand you in this respect. Since we now understand this aspect of your earthly modes of life, however, we are in a position to recognize and appreciate it accordingly, which is why I express my gratitude to all of you by expressing my joy. We too have very hard days of work and very often have to do our duties for several days without sleep, especially when, through the unreasonableness of individuals in your group, things are done which we have the duty to balance out. You should also try to make him understand that his expressions and speech become more moderate about me and my girlfriends, etc., because his speech and thoughts about physical love and connectedness are often so impure and even primitive that the feeling of shame is not spared to me, although we only know such feelings from earlier lore. That an Earth human can think and speak so impurely in this regard is an abomination to me. It is so impure and unclean that one should fundamentally not talk about it.
That damn jerk. I will have to read him the riot act again when the time comes. I will give him a girl. Please, do not do that.
I have lost control, sorry.
You should not apologize, and you need even less to cry.
It hurts me very much that Jacobus does not care about the true things and values.
Little child girl, come on. Do not be sad now. This lousy jerk may one day understand.
Contact Report 080.
I was just hovering above the top of the tree when I registered such strong pain impulses from you that I was frightened and depressed the ship's steering mechanism in a reflex movement, with the result that I destroyed and flattened the entire top of the tree with the lower part of the ship. What is certain so far is that the Giza intelligences have joined forces with a group of fleeing and malignant intelligences from space, see next entry, who are involved in the concerns of the Giza intelligences and are helpful to them. Their outer forms correspond to your observation that they have oversized eyes and some other special things about them.
Contact Report 081.
It is a work by the Giza intelligences in collaboration with the refugees from the Pegasus area. They were located by and brought to the attention of the group in Brazil about 6 weeks ago, after which a connection was established between them. The merger with the Giza intelligences was then only a matter of time. So they took advantage of the knowledge of the Pegasus refugees and of their equipment. A swinging wave vibrator, working on a microwave basis, thereby came to them very conveniently in order to cause damage to the actual value of the developing Sohar Center, Meditation Center at the Simia Silver Star Center, and to possibly destroy it. A Pegasus refugee, whom you have observed, investigated the data of the value, after which on August 30th, around the 4th hour of the morning, the Pegasus ship was directed to the center to bring the swinging wave vibrator into action. The swinging wave bundle was placed behind the wall, which had already collapsed earlier due to a water ingress. The strong swinging waves released caused a very high vibrational wave, which within a few seconds pulled the nearly 150 centimeters thick concrete wall from its anchorage, lifted it a little, and hurled it forward, which is why it had fallen so far forward. The microwave swinging wave vibrators work with such a strong potency that in a few fractions of a second they are deadly to any form of life in such a manner that it acts like a lightning-fast aging process, which even an ignorant person could immediately detect.
He, Ptah, will get hold of the Pegasus refugees in the next few days and bring them back to their home planet, where they will be handed over to those responsible and put out of action, as you would say.
But tell me, Quetzal, how does the crazy vibration swinging wave work?
It is a swinging wave vibrator, not a vibration swinging wave. Unfortunately, I am not allowed to explain officially how it is constructed, but you can be assured that the Earth scientists are already developing these apparatuses in their early days. These, however, are completely different in operation from those of the Pegasus refugees. They are transformed step up, by a precisely tuned thought-swinging wave, after which they then generate the necessary energy. The Giza intelligences are not able to do this, because they are not able to generate these thought impulses. Thus, they were dependent on the Pegasus refugees. Cut back on the concerns around us and our ships, etc. to a large extent, and dedicate yourself only to the fundamentally important facts of the evolution of the spirit or the teaching of the spirit, creation energy teaching.
It almost seems to me as if you are very depressed and therefore speak angrily. Calm down, Ptah, for you know that the time will be long before the Earth humans finally learn to understand and grasp.
Excuse my surge of emotions.
Contact Report 084.
I had very difficult trouble to become mistress of the forces that suddenly invaded me, because they hit me with such an improbable force that I lost my senses, was unconscious for several minutes. Only the fact that Playa, whom I had attained for the experiment, and who monitored everything with technical equipment, switched on the apparatus when my senselessness occurred and hurled the invading forces back, saving me from losing this life. Even when I made another attempt to clarify the matter, this time on a purely technical basis, it was doomed to total failure. So there were 2 other technical attempts. The analyzers functioned until the locating beams collided with the enormous concentrative energy. Then everything went very quickly. The locating beams were actually consumed in fractions of a second, just as if they had served as food for the force penetrating them. Then suddenly this tremendous force was in the middle of the analyzer's central apparatus and was eating its way into the actual heart, namely into the sensor area. The sensors were torn apart from the inside with bursting noises, which also destroyed the entire apparatus.
Contact Report 086.
You sadden me very much, my friend, because
You grieve me very much, for this means the non-fulfillment and destruction of all of our tasks.
Don't cry, girl, please.
you should understand that it hurts her very deeply.
But please, girl, stop crying now.
You think I might be angry?
Not exactly, no, but you seem very upset.
Certainly that is so. I am very saddened. You act truly only according to the best understanding of the concerns, which is why I cannot arouse anger against you. Go in peace and be assured of my reverent friendship.
It is just that everything is so very sad.
Contact Report 087.
I lowered my ship to the clearing and overlooked the grazing deer because it was a bit hidden between the bushes. So it got into the protective shield of the ship and was killed within fractions of a second, which is very painful for me. I am really very sorry. I am so sorry about the animal. I was just too careless.
Contact Report 088.
As you know, Asket and her people are still far ahead of our stage of evolution in many respects. Concerned for you and for all our tasks, Father Ptah asked Asket whether you might be granted mechanical or electronic protection by her or her people if, contrary to expectations, Mr. Glanzman's subconscious would find your position. Asket was unable to procure what was desired, but Father handed over formulas and plans to build a disintegrator for the total elimination of strictly religious fluidal powers. Note: see Contact Report 85P27 to 39. Quetzal created the small apparatus in less than 2 days, which is now already installed and working in the small telemeter disc floating above your center. Should something be done against you in this direction, then you may be unconcerned, because all powers would be totally eliminated before they even came within your reach. I do not understand. I must have misspoken when I said the name Jacobus. That is very unfortunate. I got confused if it is what you say. I was talking about Adolf at the time, but not about Jacobus. I ask that Jacobus please be lenient, because we are also subject to mistakes and sometimes become subject to errors and mix-ups. According to the latest analyses, a demonstration with our beam ships must, unfortunately, be excluded for the time being. This is due to the fact that, in particular, group outsiders, but also some group members, believe themselves to be privileged in matters of demonstration. Also, the erroneous opinion has arisen from the mission leaving and betraying members that we must make not only our ships, but also ourselves noticeable or visible as proof of our existence. We cannot meet these unreasonable wishes in any form, because they run counter to the meaning of all our tasks. We have no reason to show ourselves to Earth humans in any of the desired forms, nor will we do so under any circumstances. Through our actions, by demonstrating our ships to various group members and non-group members, the belief has arisen that we must continue to do this, and even do it in increased measure, on the one hand as an obligation, and on the other hand as thanks and proof of existence on our part. And as explained, some believe they have a privilege, but this cannot be the case at all. These confusing wishes and demands force us not to announce any official demonstration in the future, or even to hold one. Only strictly in the area of the honest internal group are still some few exceptions to be made, here and there. By the way, neither us and our ships and our existence are of importance at all, but only the task we all have to fulfill. We cannot allow that by the mentioned wishes and demands, new idolizations and idealizations arise, which would inevitably lead to a new religion, as this has already happened many times.
Contact Report 089.
I am also very sorry, but we have to accept the individual decisions of any life forms as such, and must not coercively change them. Our cause is good and has no iota of anything negative in it. We all work only in the knowledge of what is truly good, because in loyalty to the laws and recommendations of the creation, we cannot do anything else.
Tell me rather, this is also a question from Guido, where the first humans in the universe originated.
That is unfortunately unknown to us.
Contact Report 090.
I was only there a few moments when a sound was heard, as if an unshielded beamship was approaching. Observing everything attentively all around and in the sky, I could not recognize anything, however, because the darkness was simply too strong. Only in front, where our court light illuminated everything, there I was able to see everything clearly out of the darkness. And as I looked over to the pole with the tape recorder switched on again after some time, and then looked down into the meadow, suddenly and as if out of nowhere a figure stood there, exactly on the strip between light and darkness, where on the one hand the light was sharply separated from the court lamp, and on the other hand, the darkness. The figure had not run there, but was actually there all of a sudden. Quietly I stood up and scurried quietly across the street and over to the pole with the tape recorder, where I fully recognized the figure, and saw that I had not been mistaken at the roadside over there, where the head of the figure had appeared to me like a grimace. Now I clearly saw that the being had a human body, and if I was not mistaken, it had to be a female body. According to Earth-human terms, this was in stark contrast to the voice that this being had, because it sounded quite deep, which means nothing, because I know very well that other beings can also have other voices in the forms, as is the case with us on Earth. Then I also saw a hand of this being, which in comparison to my fingers seemed quite oversized, namely about twice as long as mine on my hand. But then the head first, oh my goodness, that was unique. I was not terrified because I had already seen some badly mutilated human faces, but I was somehow fascinated by the sight, which is why I really looked at it first, before I reached for my cannon, tore it out of the holster, tightened the handle and wanted to unlock it, which was, unfortunately, a mistake of mine, because when I raised the cannon, the strange being disappeared just as suddenly and without a trace as it had come. Somehow I feel as if this being, who was perhaps 160 centimeters tall, can communicate telepathically, and probably wanted to get in touch with me in this way as well, which it did not succeed in due to my blockade. Since then, I have always had the certain feeling that this being will come again, and that with a quite peaceful intention. This is also evident from its voice, which was recorded by the tape recorder on the street pole. I tried to decipher the sounds and came to the conclusion that it was always the same words that the being spoke. It sounded like "merg merg" to me. For 2 full days I looked at it, and strangely enough, I always came to the same conclusion that this word "merg," if I filtered it out correctly, means nothing but peace. Since then, it always sounds to me as if this being had asked me if I was also peaceable with him or her. What I have to say is this: the head of the being had the shape of a human head, but the appearance was quite monster-like, namely a cross between a fish and a frog, with a quite big mouth and a kind of herringbone over the skull, which was as shiny as everything else of this head, which I would like to call somehow beautiful, because even if it looked monster-like in the twilight, it was very well formed and very natural. Somehow the being seemed to me to have risen from a fable, namely like an amphibian.
I know these kinds of beings. They are human life forms that used to live in water and on land. Amphibians, as you rightly say, but I do not know that such life forms that live very, very far away from this system are supposed to be here. You have not succumbed to deception, and I am somehow familiar with the very cumbersome language of the being. If I can take the tape recorder with me, I will go back to the station and call Father if necessary, because he knows some of those cumbersome languages that amphibians speak when they cannot communicate telepathically, because telepathy is their actual means of communication. Father knew immediately, because the sounds originate from a guttural language known to him of a human life form race equally known to him, which is at home in the area of a system on a planet known to you as Deneb, at a distance of about 2,000 light-years from the Sol system. The sounds Claire and you heard are very awkward because they are very crude to these Siegners, as they are called. Normally, they communicate only telepathically because their guttural language is very difficult for them, which they only use for communication when they have to communicate with other forms of life that are not capable of telepathy. What further astonished Father was that you also correctly analyzed the meaning and concept of the word, because Merg actually means peace, according to which it is really easy to judge that you apparently also met the correctness with it, which says that the being observed by you came in peaceful intention. First inspections in the last 70 minutes have now revealed that last Monday during the nighttime, one of our large surveillance discs in the area of southern Europe registered a foreign flying ship, but did not transmit this to the station, because it had not stored this data due to a disturbance field, which registered itself as of natural origin in our surveillance devices, and thus also had not transmitted it to our station. Checking this disk now revealed that its equipment had not been shut down for seconds by a natural Earth interference field in any wise, but that an artificial interference field from some flying ship had caused this brief damage, controlled by some intelligence. What remained unobserved during the disturbance of our surveillance equipment was an image recorder that automatically recorded the foreign flying machine in the moving image. After which, we now know that this cylindrical ship, about 12 meters in diameter, is somewhere on the Earth, where, unfortunately, we do not yet know. Apparently, it is equipped with some kind of protective shield, which made our analyzers ineffective, and we could not determine the location. Well, it is actually something new, a new transmission apparatus that Quetzal constructed. He wants today's report to be transmitted with this new apparatus, which can be switched to different speeds. Our 2-hour conversation, if everything is correct, would be transmitted within only about 30 minutes, whereby you would write as fast and implement all picture forms in as short a time as only a computer device can work. This new apparatus would surpass the old one by far.
Contact Report 091.
However, we were able to ascertain with certainty that their ship, see previous entry, has not yet left the earthly space, so it is still somewhere camouflaged and shielded in a hiding place. Father tried to find out on their home star who and why they came to the Earth, but he was told that the current whereabouts of 4 ships of the Signer were unknown, so no information could be given in this regard. That it could only be one of these 4 ships was clear, because exact coordinate messages were recorded from all other units, and none were even close to the SOL system or in the SOL system. According to the Signer, the 4 ships with unknown whereabouts are older expedition ships, which unfortunately only have very limited means of remote communication on a technological basis. This means that the Signer here on Earth cannot communicate with their home planet, precisely because their means of remote communication cannot bridge the distance of 2,000 light-years. The maximum range of their devices is unfortunately less than 1,400 light-years.
But then they would be able to make a mental telepathic connection.
Unfortunately, this is not possible for them, because the Signer only master the primary telepathy, not the spirit telepathy.
Oh, so then they are planet-bound with this telepathy form. But there is one thing that does not make sense to me about the whole thing. Why don't the twits get in touch with you? Why are they trying to come to me, or to come into contact with me of all things?
There is a very precise explanation for this. The Signer represent a human race whose senses are highly sensitized to swinging waves from outside their own bodies, but only in planetary or ship internal regions. Thus, they are able to receive and analyze swinging waves of all life forms. And here lies the answer to your question. The Signer have a form of government on their homeworlds, which your Earth humans designate as herd instinct, but which is nevertheless led by the strongest of the herd. So this order is a resemblance of a herd order in animals, the strongest of which exercises the position of the leading animal. Since the Signer had held this form of government since time immemorial, they changed it in the course of the last millennia only to the extent that they replaced the strongest of their kind with the most knowledgeable in spiritual matters, who thus was also the one who emits the highest swinging waves, which is synonymous with the most powerful swinging waves. Thus, it is only natural that on foreign worlds, when they visit such worlds intentionally or unintentionally, the Signer search for their kind and their form of government also for the highest spirit knowledge-based swinging waves of this world, and, if necessary, turn to it when they need it. And through your spiritual teaching, also known as creation energy-based learning, and your knowledge, you are the person on the earth who gives off this highest swinging wave from himself. This again means for the Signer that, for them, you are that form of life on this world, in respect of that mentioned, above which no other form of life stands. This alone can be the reason why they try to connect with you.
Nevertheless, there are some things that do not make sense to me. For example, why these twits do not turn to you or to the other groups. Because all of you have decidedly several times higher swinging waves than me.
Your thoughts are very logical, but you forget that we have to leave our swinging waves in our station or in our ships to be absorbed by them, in order not to influence the Earth human beings through them.
Contact Report 092.
But now I have to explain to you that in the future you should only devote yourself to your work. But that you can do this again, as always, it is necessary that I take you with me to my ship for a few minutes to regenerate your nerves and also some other things in you. It will not take long. Come now.
We were gone about 20 minutes.
Contact Report 093.
How did it actually end with the Signer girl who you fetched last Saturday, November 26th, after my calling?
Everyone is with us at the station, including her ship, whose intergalactic propulsion was destroyed by an explosion. The Signers have a very ancient technology, which was passed to them less than 4,000 years ago, for which we do not have the necessary knowledge. For this reason, it will take a long time before we have repaired the ship, after which it will be returned to the homeworld.
But spare parts could be brought in from the home planet.
Unfortunately, this is not possible, because for this outdated technology, the necessary knowledge is missing there, too. And furthermore, the Signers are technologically absolutely untalented, which is why they are not able to repair their technological devices, etc. themselves. They were underway for 4 long years, more than 2 years of which they drove in free fall through space after the explosion of the propulsion unit.
By free fall, you mean they were drifting through space without a drive, right?
Certainly. They spent the time in artificial deep sleep and therefore needed no food.
I understand. Maybe they were still lying in water tanks and were woken up by a robot after a long bath.
Sure, but how do you know?
I have seen such scenes in utopian movies before. Are you twisting my arm?
That is no joke.
Man, oh man, then the fantasies of the utopian writers are not even far-fetched.
I will ask Asina.
That's how the little child introduced herself to me.
Sure, Asina is a very kind being.
I did not know that they had similar customs to us in certain relationships. Then the little girl pressed her cold fish frog beak to your cheek? It seemed to me like a kiss.
Sure, and it should also be a kiss, because that is the Signer's regular greeting form.
But tell me, why did they not use their radios or something when their ship's propulsion exploded?
Because the remote communication devices were also destroyed. I will also talk to her, and surely she will agree for a picture.
Contact Report 095.
I still saw her Semjase bounce up and hit her head against the wall in the fall. Then she had disappeared, because apparently she had pressed the trigger button of the transmitter when falling.
Contact Report 096.
It just did not make sense to me that Quetzal came here from Era just to ask me about the incidents that happened with Simyase. Instead, however, he took the trouble to make a 7-hour trip here, to fritter away almost an hour with me and then take on another 7-hour flight to Era. By the way, what are you always fiddling about with your funny belt device? What are you fiddling with at your funny device again? What does that thing represent? Isados, this device is a translator. I need it because I do not understand your language. So I sent my spiritual consciousness to Era and found a rather strange building there, which somehow magically attracted me. So I penetrated into a room that seemed to me like a super-modern operating theater. There were various containers, which seemed to me like glass shrines, but equipped with all kinds of possible and impossible devices and apparatuses. All but one container were empty. In the occupied one, Simyase lay completely undressed and obviously deep frozen, dead. Her head lay in a horseshoe-shaped opaque apparatus, which is why I was only able to see her face exactly. Isados, it is the truth that Simyase was dead when you found her. Her brain was so badly injured that there was no hope of being able to sustain her life. Our scientists were also unable to help her, which is why her physical existence was slowly being marked by death. She was therefore placed in a deep coma in the container you found her in only a few minutes before her life was finally extinguished. Through the intravenous supply of various substances, her body was put into a rigid and deep frozen state in a few fractions of a second, which immediately extinguished her physical life, but only for a predetermined period of time during which her spiritual form did not escape from her. For in this state of resurrection possibility, the latter clings in a stagnant form to the organic locality assigned to her, namely, in the brain area. Only after the resuscitation of the body does it automatically put aside its stagnation and push itself back to activity. While Simyase was prepared for a later resuscitation, her father Ptah tried to help her in the Dal universe with Asket, whom you should know. But this help was not able to be given by the people in the other universe either, which is why Asket sought help from a human life-form race in her universe that was 4,000 years more advanced, which she actually found and received there. From there, several scientists came to Era and took Simyase. In a lengthy process, the destroyed brain parts of Simyase were removed. The frozen brain acids were inserted into artificially generated new plasma protonal brain parts and directly reconnected to the brain, after which a rapid healing process allowed the artificial and natural plasmas to grow together, and the skull could be closed again, which was then regenerated by a rapid process. This made everything the same as before, and nothing ever again indicates that these events clouded many things. Simia Se will have no memory of it, not even of the 42-hour duration, since she was dead.
Contact Report 097.
Even though the Sonier were able to save her brain through their very advanced science, the entire process of transforming the artificial protoplasma form of the brain parts takes several years, during which Simya Se must not suffer any overexertion. See previous entry. The artificial plasma form of the new brain parts has to be transformed into physical plasma, which takes several years, namely 3 to 4 years.
You said that these Sonair helped Simya Se. Can you tell me more about them?
Only this much I know about them is that they are a human race of the Dal universe, whose average age of 1,160 Earth years is far superior to our life expectancy. Their body size is 175 centimeters 5,009, according to earthly measure, whereby their skull form is much higher and longer than ours, as I could determine. The length of the head is about 25% more than that of us and you. Their race is called Sona, in a language unknown to me, and their overall development in technical and medical terms corresponds to 4,000 years more than ours.
But tell me, why do you say that they are 4,000 years ahead of you? Isairo said that this was true for Asket's people.
That is of correctness, but we have now reached the same level with the help of the Timars. Sorry, I misspoke with 4,000 years in relation to the Sonar.
Who is that again?
These are the people from whom Asket originates.
Do you know what these Timars call our universe?
They call it Dern Universe.
And what do you call it?
Our universe is also called Dern Universe.
That is how we talk about the Dern universe in the future. But now again a question regarding the Sonair, who are so highly developed. What is their technology?
It already corresponds to forms that we ourselves cannot yet understand. They are far superior to us in the control of space and time, but also in all other things.
How, for example, do they master time and space to reach Era, and how do they master the passage through the barriers of the universe?
They no longer need space-traveling flying apparatuses for this, because their technology is already anchored and deeply embedded in the transmitter area.
Sim Yase once tried to explain to me weeks ago why you do not just associate with us Earth humans, especially in physical form. Somehow it sounded from her words that a danger is connected with it for you?
The reason that we cannot connect with you human beings of the Earth in physical form is this. The levels of swinging waves between the human being on the Earth and us are so fundamentally different and pronounced in the forms of the negative and the positive as well as the balanced that this can lead to serious consequences if they touch each other. As a rule, these human swinging waves reach up to 90 meters, which is why it must be ensured that this distance is not broached. That is to say that terrestrial humans do not reach us under this distance mark. Our swinging waves are very highly sensitive, and we ourselves react equally highly sensitively to oscillations that penetrate our oscillation range. In contrast to the terrestrial humans, we are very high in our consciousness-based overall development, 20 to 35 million years ahead of the terrestrial humans, which is why our entire swinging wave system has refined. If the swinging waves of the much less sensitive human being on the Earth were to strike us now, precisely because earthly human, and thus also quite unbalanced and negative swinging waves, would penetrate into the area of our swinging waves, then this would amount to a very strong swinging wave structural agitation, which in reality also embodies it, which would have the consequence that the strong external influence would lead to an instantaneous uncontrollability of all reactions, thoughts, and actions in us, which would at the same time trigger uncontrolled feelings of fear. This means that when the swinging waves of an Earth human meet us, who unfortunately still emits very negative swinging waves today, we would be affected in many respects in momentary speed and start to act uncontrollably, which was also the case with Simia when she fell in the center and suffered the severe injury. As a rule, when we go among terrestrial people, which is very rarely the case, we use a device that protects us from terrestrial human swinging waves. But this was never necessary for you, because you are free of these swinging waves through all your knowledge and equalizedness, according to which it comes very close to ours. In the center now, a certain protective ring, a small protective screen was established, which keeps away such swinging waves of the terrestrial humans. This protective shield, however, is only of limited strength, so only directly for the center itself, but in the lower space, still weak radiation from outside can enter if someone goes directly to the entrance or to the outer wall. Now, when Jacobus was at the outer door, his swinging wave penetrated to Simia and produced in it the fear and uncontrollability I described earlier, which drove her to an uncontrolled action. The consequences of this are known to you. These swinging wave structure agitations, which are dangerous for us, together with our strict directives, are the main reason why we are not allowed to engage in physical contact with terrestrial humans. Even with our telepathic or even only inspirational impulse-based contacts, we have to exercise extreme caution, because thrown back impulse-based swinging waves also have similar effects.
Then you are quite susceptible.
You are speaking a true word. But our sensitivity in this regard is not only based on our evolution, because our homeland is also a very important factor in this, because it itself is highly sensitized, which does not remain untainted to us human life forms.
I do not quite understand that, Quetzal, but I have been trying to fathom it for a long time. Simia once made a rather strange remark to me. This led me to speculate, which is why I assume that you live on your Pleiades in a differently dimensioned form. By this I mean that you are probably up there in our universe and in our time, as Simia once explained to me, but that you are dimensionally shifted, namely in a parallel system of our Pleiades.
But this does not change anything, because we are just as compact and present in this dimension of ours as we are in that of our Pleiades systems, because we are descended from this dimension and also from your dimension. Why we live in a parallel dimension on Era and in our Pleiades systems, in general, is due to the fact that the Pleiades systems are not habitable for us in this dimension, your dimension, and could not be made habitable by our ancestors either, because the system for habitation is still much too young for us in this dimension.
Your explanation is plausible, but what is the nature of the Pleiades system in the other dimension? Is it as solid as our Earth?
It is a parallel dimension, that is what I said. Therefore, matter is also of the same strength as the Earth's matter. The dimensions are simply different in their structure, but not in time and space. Nevertheless, I would like to hear from you who you call cannibal.
Gladly. Yes, just grin. I call my wife that, because I find that this designation for her from my side...
Ha 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 ha! That is really humorous besides.
Just grin, you monster, and make fun of it until I pull your ears out.
It is really funny how you show your affection. Only that is why I am amused. Slowly, I understand better why Simia has changed so much since she is in contact with you. Her humor, which she had never known before in its present form, seems to come from you. I know from Simia that she is very comfortable with your jokes.
Contact Report 098.
First, I want to give you my best regards from my cannibal. See previous entry. She agrees that you should call her what I do.
She delights me very much with it, and she should be sure of my thanks. It is very strange to me that I feel joy in such matters, because so far such things were strange to me, but I feel quite exhilarated by this joy.
But I see, my son, that you are versatile and that you still react naturally. This might also be the reason why you react to certain things, including feeling-based ones, of us Earth humans in such a form that you feel joy in them.
My inner life is probably not hidden from you?
You were born too late for that.
What are you trying to express? It is ha, now I understand. I understand, ha, I am some centuries older than you, and yet I was born too late for you. That, ha, that is really good. I understand you very well now.
Do you not kiss your sweet ones, your girls, and vice versa? Or is that only left to us Earth humans?
But yes, we also have these feeling-based stirrings.
Contact Report 099.
You really cannot do a shortcut just because everything is not going as you envisioned it would. Remember that we cursed Earth moles are as ignorant and barbaric as the last monkeys from the jungle. Consider for once that the truth has not been fed to us off of spoons, and that your fair ancestors were involved in this damned mess. Just remember that you cannot turn an Earth human into a pig, and then give him or her only one short chance to develop into a human being again. Remember, damn it, that your ancestors stole and ruined all our knowledge, raised themselves up before us as gods and god creations, and that they were the ones who rejoiced in our ruination and exploited us through it. Absolutely knowing that we had to turn into the most miserable mess in the entire universe. It is therefore damn unfair if, for once, you take a close look at everything from our side, if you just want to leave us lying in the dirt. We are barbarians, unknowing, poor, and damned pigs, yes, but we became that through your ancestors, my son, consider that. And if you already know that, and you know that damn well, because otherwise you would not have come to us to help us, and to bring back to us what your heroic, damned ancestors have ruined for us. Why do you not feel obliged to help us to the very end, even if we are still quite stupid and primitive in our cursed ignorance, because all our knowledge has been stolen or ruined?
Contact Report 100.
But take into positive consideration the fact that our task is extremely difficult, and that we must acquire new knowledge continuously, and mostly by making mistakes, just as you have to make in order to gain knowledge. This is not meant as an excuse, but only a request that you try to understand us, and that we still have a lot to learn, especially here on the Earth, in connection with you Earth humans and with your, still in many parts, hidden forms of thinking, feelings, and emotions. We can only ask all of you to understand us, because we are only human beings like you, and we too are far from making any mistakes in the evolution.
Contact Report 102.
Are the Signers still with you? Manara. She will still be here for several months because the repair of the interstellar propulsion of her ship has turned out to be very difficult.
Contact Report 109.
But tell me, girl, the apple there beside the viewing screen, have you stolen that from somewhere?
It comes from the greenhouses of my father.
You mean that it is from Ta's giant box, that it grew there and was harvested?
Definitely.
Aha, then you also have such fruits, as we know them here on the Earth.
Sure, but they were not originally native fruits of Era. The apple is from a tree, which comes from a progeny of earthly trees.
Oh, I see, so you have fruit trees that were taken from the Earth, which you simply continue to cultivate, and you also let these bloom and bear fruit in your great spacer. So what kinds of trees do you have then?
We possess trees, shrubs, and plants of every kind, as they also exist on the Earth. There are even various kinds in our greenhouses which have already been extinct on the Earth for a very long time. But we have preserved them and have made them useful to us. Thus, we have all fruits, as they are also known on the Earth with you, and even several more, which you only know through your researchers of antiquity, etc.
That is fantastic. And how do these fruits taste today with you? Do they still have the same taste as we know it?
You think now of this apple. Sure, the taste has remained the same. It is perhaps even somewhat more intense than with your apples of this sort, and certainly much better in its juice. But all the other fruit trees from the Earth also bear fruit with the tastes or flavors known to you. It's just that these, as I have already explained, have become somewhat more intense since our robots and androids maintaining the trees work on these very attentively and also have great concern for them, as this happens with all plants cultivated by them. Billy took the large apple and brought it home with him, where he handed it over to Guido Moosbrugger, who then inserted the apple into a glass of alcohol and made it durable in this manner. The apple still exists today and is still in the same glass under the care of Guido.
Contact Report 112.
How is it with you? Do you actually dance too? I mean, like with us, men and women together, etc.
Such rhythmic movements are well known to us, and the Earth humans have also taken this over from our ancestors. These rhythmic movements are, to my knowledge, known among all human forms in the universe, only in very different forms. But the rule is that male life forms among us do not indulge in such rhythmic movements together with female life forms, but only alone or among their peers.
Contact Report 115.
How does it actually stand with you all on Era, with regard to marriage? You, Quetzal, are you actually married, and if so, how many children do you have? And you, Ptah, your wife, is she your only one?
The law of love has overall universal validity, only that it very often becomes changed by the most diverse human races according to their own human and illogical negative values. Thus, they often create a monogamous marriage, which is literally restricted to only one woman and one man for such a marriage and such a family. The truthfulness of monogamy, as you have so aptly disassembled for me once, no longer applies. Well then, I was married to 3 women, which corresponds to the minimum value of a we-form partnership of universal expanse. Nevertheless, out of the 3, the only one living is the mother of my deceased son and my 2 daughters, for the other 2 have left me by means of death, the one already more than 300 years ago and the other one more than 360 years ago.
Aha, and how many years old is your still remaining wife?
It's 30 years.
Well, thanks for your information. So what about you, Quetzal?
He is pampered by 4 very beautiful women and has 6 children with them.
You smile so suspiciously, girl. You seem to be really happy about it?
Sure, his wives are my best friends, and they always wish that I shall become the 5th in their alliance.
And, Quetzal, what do you say to that?
Simia say and I are of another opinion than my wives.
And why, if one may ask?
I would not like to marry again. On the one hand, because the loss of a human being by death gives me very much grief, and on the other hand, because I have found a very important task in my activities, which can hardly be reconciled with a marriage.
Contact Report 119.
Even our possibilities are limited. You are only looking at everything from the perspective of an earthly standpoint, whereby you overestimate our technology, at least in this case.
That is possible. And I see, therefore, that even for you, limits are set in certain matters of technology.
that is of correctness.
Contact Report 121.
What are the recordings stored on? Manara, they are very small electronic storage disks the size of a normal female thumbnail. Aha, and you could not have lost such a storage element? Manara, no, with absolute certainty not. There would only be the possibility that one of the elements would be defective, by which means recordings would be missing. I will immediately let it be checked. Yes, you were right with your assumption that something was lost. But it was not a storage element, but rather a microscopically small connecting piece between two tiny storage cells, by which means the recordings were not played. They were recorded, however, and thus I know the data now. I am sorry that this misfortune has happened to me. Somehow I must have damaged the element during a manipulation. Note: the following excerpt refers to a detailed history of the Plejaren civilization and their expeditions to Earth and the Solar System given in Contact Report 5, S67, 2-193, Contact Report 9, S120, 2-170, and Contact Report 70, S23, 2-181. Then I have a somewhat complicated question. Through various calculations, I have another time encountered the fact that something cannot be right with the dimensions of our present, from this to the Centaurus groups, as well as to Lyra and Vega, and even to the Pleiades. According to my calculations, these suns and planets addressed, of which there was already often talk between Simia, Quetzal and me, as well as between Ta and me, would really have to be in other dimensions, as it was said to me repeatedly. This would therefore actually mean that their Lyra and Vega human beings, and still some others, are just as non-existent in our present dimension as also the Pleiadians and the Centaurus human beings. And if my calculations are right, then you all would have to live just a fraction of a second in the future to our space-time configuration, which for us, however, results in a difference of several thousand years with regard to technological development. But how this is connected, that is a riddle to me, and it could even be very difficult to understand. But Ptah once spoke of the fact that on that or on a planet of the Centaurus groups, a people lives in overpopulation, which comprises about 120 billion, 120,000. So these, then, would have to live in the future, as seen by us. On the other hand, I also calculated that at that time, around 22 million years ago, when the events took place in the Lyra and Vega area, which eventually led to the visits to our Earth. At that time, through some skillful manipulations, the Lyra and Vega refugees fell into the past and so penetrated into our space-time level. With certainty, this was no so-called chance, but rather a full calculation. This arose from my contemplation of the fact that the technology of your ancestors was already so widely developed at that time that these would have tracked and found the refugees with certainty. But since that was not the case, the refugees must have retreated into areas that fell outside of the control of the pursuers. But concerning this, there are only two possibilities, so namely the past or the future. But as I know the things now, the refugees were not able to venture into the future, so only the past remained open to them, to where they then actually also retreated. And because the past comprises millions of years and even billions of years in a life potential form, the pursuit was given up. But this, in turn, means that the technology of your ancestors was not yet developed so far that they would have been able to carry out detections in the areas of the past or the future.
Contact Report 123.
The objects observed and photographed by you come from the Andromeda areas, and these are fine material flying objects, similar to the bioorganic flying objects that you know. In this case, however, it is such that these flying objects are fine material and not bioorganic, and that these, depending on preference and need, are generated by powers of consciousness from a very highly developed human dwarf race whose size amounts to approximately 70 centimeters, whereby I speak of body height. This race, which is even unknown to us, is fine-dimensioned and stands in the advice of the High Council. Anyhow, the High Council became informed and enlightened by these Nabulanians, so they are, in fact, called.
Contact Report 131.
But how is it in this respect on the Pleiades? Do you still have large and open areas?
Sure, because firstly, we keep our population at the number of the natural state, and secondly, every inhabitant of our worlds is careful to ensure that kilometer-wide areas remain free of any buildings. We love the freedom and the vastness of the land, which is why everything is arranged in such a manner that a crowding never results. Thus, the large settlements, the cities, are limited to a minimum number, as is also the case with the villages. All the individual residential buildings, however, in which families live with no more than 5 persons, comprise a square of 100 meters outside the cities and villages.
You mean that 5 people at most, and so, therefore, a family, live in such a square parcel of land, and that also their house stands on this piece of land?
Sure. About 1/3 of our population lives in such a manner, while the other 2/3 of our population are concentrated in the few cities and villages, but they are fitted with very large wooded or low-planted parklands underground and above ground. Also, every small or large residential building, in which more or less families live, like with you in the multi-family dwellings, is equipped with a 100x 100-meter large park garden, which is jointly used, however, by all inhabitants of the city dwelling or village dwelling concerned.
I find that fantastic. So thus, each high-rise building or apartment building has its own park.
Sure.
And how is the weather on Era? Do you have anything better thereof?
With us, there is no severe weather, and there are no natural disasters, such as are common in the current time on Earth.
Contact Report 135.
Manara waits for me a few hundred meters away with a herd of cows. We also have our ship in the vicinity there.
Oh, I see. Then you are probably the reason why the cattle are so restless up there on the southeastern slope of the forest.
That may very well be because Manara is with the cows, which she is fond of and with which she is gladly occupied.
Contact Report 136.
Already in the beginning time, when the papacy and the Vatican were founded and brought to life in Rome, the most negative place existing in Italy was unconsciously selected for the residence of the Pope, the city of Rome, where the Vatican resided, from which, for almost 2,000 years, murder, enslavement, exploitation, deception, and every possible crime spread across the earthly world, and even other worlds in the universe and in distant, foreign galaxies did not remain spared from these vile, murderous, religious, and deadly deeds, because innocent extraterrestrial visitors on Earth were confronted with the madness of the religious cult of the Vatican, and, therefore, Catholicism, and succumbed to this delusional faith. And after their return to their homeworlds, their people living there were also infected by the acquired delusional faith until religious wars broke out. And that is why entire planets and even enormous solar systems have been destroyed. Toward the latter part of 1983, or spring of 1984, we are planning to introduce an effective peace meditation to benefit Earth, its inhabitants, and events that will occur there. Included in this effort will be everyone on Era and many members from our Federation, who total will comprise more than 3.5,3,500,000 humans.
Contact Report 137.
If we had put one of our androids in your position, then he would have destroyed himself if all of this illogicalness had arisen.
You have strange jokes in stock.
No, because my words correspond to the truth. We actually expected too much from you. A test has proven this. Quetzal came up with the idea. He wanted to know to what extent a half-organic apparatus could bear the illogicalness that has crept into the group. Quetzal programmed an android with all records of negating and negative forms of all group members. The results were awful. These stored illogical modes of acting and thinking led to the fact that the android became crazy in all of its actions and speeches. Our androids are programmed based on absolute logic in thinking and acting, and these abilities surpass even our own respective abilities and potential. Now, during the transfer of data, Quetzal also paid close attention to the fact that your own data of your work and all your efforts toward the instruction of the group members and all their interests became programmed into the second android. Thus, the exact situation arose in the two androids, which included everything that happened between you and the group members since the beginning. On the one hand, the overall view of the group members was placed into the first android, and on the other hand, your data was placed into the second android. Expecting something terrible to happen, Quetzal placed both androids in an old beam ship in the vicinity of the planet Pluto, where he then activated them and they began to live. Then, on our view screens, we could watch the terrible sight. Already, after a few minutes, the android programmed with your data began to become visibly ill, while our recording devices registered an action of complete helplessness. Soon, completely apathetically, it wanted to destroy itself. But then suddenly, in the very next moment, it senselessly and angrily raised its voice. Meanwhile, the second android spoke absolutely crazy words without thinking and manipulated all of the ship's apparatuses without sense or purpose. Despite the visible internal difficulty of the android programmed with your data, it tried again and again to bring the other android, stored with the illogical data, to its senses, which it apparently managed to do quite often. But truthfully, this was only apparent, for as our recording devices clearly determined, the attempts of reconciliation and reason only worked so far that the logic of the words of the android representing you released reassuring impulses, while the second android did not at all have in mind to make the logical explanations its own. The investigations of the registry devices unambiguously proved that the negatively programmed android had developed a blatant form of self-addiction, egoism, and individualism, as well as a lust for power and, despite the superficial acknowledgement of the logical explanations offered to it, etc., was unwilling to actually adopt them. Truthfully, as the recording devices unambiguously showed, it only wanted its own will to count and to enforce it, which finally went so far that your android rapidly deteriorated and suddenly became crazy. As we could see from our devices, his artificial organic brain mass slowly began to cook and to steam. Then there was an explosion, and his head was torn up beyond all recognition. Meanwhile, the other android, who only cared about this briefly, continued to act completely illogically and, moreover, spoke very confused and crazy things. Then the moment came when he wildly and senselessly hit the ship's equipment and created an inferno, when he accidentally touched the automatic self-destruct mechanism of the ship, and it was destroyed in an immense explosion. For us, it was proof that we had expected inhuman traits from you. What an android cannot take, a human life form cannot take either. Only through Quetzal's test could we grasp the full scope of what had caved in on you over all the years.
Contact Report 141.
For about 40 days, there has been another station on Earth, created by human life forms, similar to us, of extraterrestrial intelligences from the planet Haster in the Garin system of the Genome Galaxy. This galaxy is located 483 million light-years away from the Earth, and 413 different human races live on the habitable planets there throughout the entire galaxy, which is, relatively seen, very little for an entire galaxy. Just a few years ago, we entered into connection with the highly sophisticated inhabitants of the planet Haster, who have progressed so far in their overall development as it will be for the Earth humans in approximately 1,120 years. With ethically and very highly distinct lifestyles, the inhabitants of Haster are very peaceful and loving, and besides this, they live in the same time level as the Sol system, thus, in the present level, as this would be said or called by you. Because the Haster inhabitants are now interested in life forms in the remote vastness of the universe, which is still inaccessible to them but cannot yet reach these areas with their technology, we have extended our connections with them in such a way that we brought an expeditionary command of the Haster inhabitants here in the Great Spacer. We also helped them build their station, which was created in the depths of the North Sea, and from where they will expand their expeditionary work across the whole world. Since their mental, physical, and consciousness-related development has not yet progressed as far as ours, we can only maintain physical contact with them using our swinging, wave-neutralizing devices, as we must also do so with the Earth humans when it is necessary now and then. However, this now means that the Haster inhabitants can freely move among the Earth humans because their swinging waves turn out to be bearable with those of the Earth humans, but only briefly. The Haster inhabitants cannot remain in the direct range of the swinging waves of the Earth humans for more than 17 hours, otherwise they begin to lose control of themselves. But since they have this 17-hour possibility, they have decided that they will seek contact with one or several Earth humans for their study purposes, and also for the instruction of the Earth humans, but certainly with no more than 3 people, who must remain silent about it for their lifetimes, which is why especially upright people are to be selected for these contacts who can be completely trusted.
Contact Report 142.
The few human races in the area of the Cassiopeia constellation in another space-time configuration are well known to us, but they have no resemblance to the life forms mentioned in this letter. Also, their flying apparatus do not correspond in any manner to the kind described here, and besides, their technology is not so far and highly developed that they could, with their own flying apparatuses, reach the Earth. The technology of one of the 2 races is presently developed so far that they prepare just the first flight attempts to outer space, and they stand just a little bit behind Earth's technological development. The second race, which is on another planet behind the Cassiopeia constellation, only has flying apparatuses that master their own planetary space somewhat certainly. Among these facts is the further complication that both of these races of human life forms exist in a different time plane in relation to the Earth, like I said, so separated from the time plane that is known to the Earth human being and in which they live. So when the human beings of the Cassiopeia constellation one day master space travel, they still will not be able, for a long time, to penetrate into the time plane in which the Earth humans live their existence.
And in our time plane known to us, no human life forms exist. Who would be capable of spaceflight in Cassiopeia, that is to say in that area?
Sure, there are human beings there, but these are not yet advanced in spaceflight, or are not yet so far advanced that they could carry out journeys through universal space. Like on the Earth, secret stations of foreign planet human races exist there on their planet, which do not, however, practice direct contact with the planet's inhabitants.
How many of all solar systems have planets that are actually inhabited by humans, which are visible from the Earth, and which are known to us? If one believed all alleged contact reports of Earth humans with extraterrestrials, practically all solar systems would be inhabited.
Truly, there are only very few solar systems inhabited by human life forms that are known to the Earth humans, and on the other hand, a lot of suns have no planetary systems. To these facts, there is still to add that many of the space-traveling races that come to the Earth are not resident in the time plane known to the Earth humans.
We already spoke very often about space-traveling human races that do not belong to you and which come, nevertheless, to the Earth. In which time plane do they all belong?
It is different for each. To mention all of them would be difficult and time-consuming.
Then let's say, for example, the humans of the area of Alpha Centauri, then Reticuli, or whatever it is, then.
The first ones live a tiny fraction of a second shifted from the Earth time plane, so therefore they cannot be reached by Earth inhabitants before they master time travel. The second human race you mentioned also does not live in the same time plane as the Earth humans.
Contact Report 144.
These conflicts within him. Possibly Hans Schutzbach finally led him to the case because through his steady insistence of getting in touch with me, I allowed myself to be led to approach him in my ship, so close that he came into my personal swinging wave field. Thus he suddenly became aware of the true love and peace, which seemed like a paradise to him. But disaster immediately fell upon him when I went away again, and he fell out of my swinging wave field. It seemed like the end of the world to him, which made him deal with suicidal intentions, from which I was able to prevent him only with great difficulty. For this reason, I tried to influence him to the better through my own swinging waves, but this was clearly wrong, because he only responded to any attempt to help him on my part by starting to pity himself more and more, and at last, a dangerous hatred built up inside of him against everything that has to do with calm, peace, and love, as well as with truth.
Contact Report 148.
This is also the reason why our own keeping of animals on Era is uniformly handled in such a manner that dogs and cats may only live in the wild or in special and very large enclosures, to which the human beings have no direct access. Already very early on, our scientists of the past recognized what pathogens these animals carry on themselves, which are dangerous for human beings, which is why they arranged appropriate measures for their keeping.
Contact Report 150.
Not only did we have to remove all of our available forces from the Earth, but also from many other worlds, including Era. We need all available forces because the population of a whole system, which includes 16 inhabited planets and 3 suns, has prepared itself for a space traversal in warlike form because their system is doomed. The targets of these still war-accustomed humans are the habitable planets of the most diverse constellations, whereby also the Sol system is included, and thus the Earth. These rather inhumane human life forms are willing to kill the inhabitants of the planets they have chosen in order to gain their own living space. On the one hand, our forces now prevent these life forms from realizing their plans by breaking out into space. But on the other hand, further of our forces systematically resettle the populations of the various endangered planets in uninhabited but easily habitable areas, while another part of our forces looks for new habitable and suitable planets on which the rest of these human beings can be settled and relocated.
Incredible. But cannot the Lyrians and vegans also help you with that?
We have also included many forces of theirs for this task. Another part of them will take over on the Earth at the end of this month, as I explained to you earlier.
I know you spoke of the fact that Manara's father, brother, and sister will come here, along with 35 others.
That is of correctness. But these 38 human beings only represent the first wave that will take over our own station and our tasks. Ours and both of those two other stations, America and Asia, will be fully staffed with our allies.
So with vegans and Lyrians? And are they all differently colored?
You say that they are chocolate brown.
Contact Report 151.
But then I have a question. How do you handle such cases on Era?
We know of no such problems because every human being on our world abides by the unwritten laws and recommendations.
Contact Report 153.
Our linguistic computers speak very fluently and even correctly emphasize when they are stored and programmed with human voices.
The group members should be given the opportunity to be able to direct all personal questions and other questions of interest to them to a special computer, which will then answer their questions for them using the best of logic.
The computer will not be in this room because it is a device designed by me, which is to be installed in the telemeter disk located high above the center. In the aforementioned room, there will only be earthly apparatuses and equipment, which will transmit the voices of the group members to the computer, and which, in turn, will also let the voice of the computer in space become audible. It is also necessary that this apparatus hovers very high above the Earth because it will not have certain data stored in it, which must then be retrieved from the central computer in the station.
Aha, now I understand. Now, it interests me only whether a meditative process will be necessary for a question.
No, because the question has to occur acoustically and through a microphone. But for this, it is also necessary that the psyche is very balanced. Otherwise, the computer will not release an answer to the questions directed to it. Thus, this necessary balance must be present in the human beings, so that questions are accepted and answered.
And how do the females among you hold up now, with the creation of the balance, if you even have such question and answer computers at all?
Those actually are there with us, and they are used very often.
Contact Report 157.
Until we meet again, my friend, I am suddenly freezing.
Contact Report 164.
Nevertheless, these strangers, who are sometimes well known to me, do not disturb me because I am also protected against them. They also cannot see me.
Then I understand nothing more at all. Tell me at last, where are the difficulties to be found?
The difficulties are to be found in the swinging waves. My device only works properly, in reference to the shielding of swinging waves and their neutralization, if the group members of the watch, etc., are not approaching me in a range closer than 70 centimeters. All that, however, causes no difficulties for me, for I have constructed my device in such a manner that upon approaches of individual group members and according to their swinging wave ranges that are dangerous for me, I am automatically removed from the danger zone by the device as soon as the persons concerned come closer to me than the safety threshold of 38 centimeters beyond the distance of the swinging wave measurement that is dangerous for me. The mechanical possibilities for such manipulations, however, lie in an area with a maximum of 9 meters, so I can, therefore, protect myself in this manner up to this distance. If I would now find myself somewhere where I have no exact overview, thus, I cannot see a threat early on when someone approaches me, having swinging waves that are dangerous for me and that are beyond the 9-meter distance, then it could be fatal for me. If I stand or sit somewhere and someone approaches me, whose danger limit for me is beyond the 9 meters mentioned, then everything would lead to a bad end.
But you still have the alarm device that warns you about it, when someone is within 500 meters.
The stronger energies of my device make the function of this warning device impossible.
But then, why does your bucket function with strangers when they are standing on the promontory or on the new path, etc.?
From a 14-meter radius from my person, an apparatus in my flying apparatus takes over the monitoring. If a corresponding warning arises, then this is transmitted to my carrying device, through which this enters into function without any time delay. But now, if someone moves in the circle between 9 and 14 meters around me and is dangerous for me in their swinging waves in this 9 to 14 meter circle, then there is no protection but only mortal danger.
But why do you leave this 4 or 5 meter circle open? You could nevertheless also protect yourself for this distance, right?
Unfortunately, no. For the time being, the possibility with a carrying device is still fully exhausted at 9 meters, in reference to its function. But after this distance, there must be a neutral ring of at least 4 meters so that the energies and surveillance equipment of my aircraft can operate and work. If this safety belt did not exist, then the energies of my carrying device and those of the ship would collide with each other or overflow into one another, through which a destruction of the equipment would come about.
But I do not yet understand, who among us is a danger for you? You said yourself that the extreme danger of a little over 7 meters lies with our people.
I told you, however, that someone else is present, who is to be reckoned as outside of the group members.
I do not understand that.
That is of correctness, and he is a constant and ever-increasing danger for me. In the extreme case, he may only come 13 meters and 71 centimeters close to me. Closer than this mark, I run a great risk.
That is puzzling to me.
His sense toward us is not good. It is even strangely hostile and interspersed with thoughts that exhibit doubts regarding our actual existence.
Yes, but something else just came to me. Somehow it seems to be illogical to me concerning W, that you cannot shield yourself against him. I think that beyond the 14-meter limit, your apparatuses in the spaceship react, through which you will be taken out of danger?
Unfortunately, that is impossible because, in regards to W, I must store him programmatically in my apparatuses and devices, according to which he does not fall within the range of the warning of strangers. But if I would store him as a stranger, then he would be removed from the closeness warning. Unfortunately, these devices cannot be constructed differently, at least not for the time being.
Contact Report 167.
All data of ours and also that of other groups working with us are separately and directly sent to a central office on ERA, where they are evaluated by coordination, and then the appropriate decisions are made. We strictly adhere to this so that we can carry on our work correctly and without influence. This is a fact that the Earth humans can hardly understand, which brings us a lot of advantages, however.
Contact Report 169.
Talking is purely a communicative device, a means for understanding, so this should only be used for this purpose.
Yes, Svoth even said this, explaining that language serves only for communication, and the communication contains only everything that is of a harmonious nature, which is why there are human races that only communicate with each other in song, musical form.
In your ranks, you should at least consider being active at times in this form, namely, with singing. It should be made a duty by an ordinal rule, because without this harmony, what is required will never be reached. Even we, and still more highly developed humans, cannot help but be harmoniously active in this form, by which means also our feelings and thoughts, etc., become more peaceful, calmer, and also more affectionate.
This I can vividly imagine, especially since I have previously heard you singing rather often, together with several others, as well as alone.
Contact Report 172.
Your earthly mission obviously allows you to find ways in your mind to obtain absolute, egalitarian brotherly love and universal love, which still remains closed to us. So I ask you, please, to speak with me about this at an appropriate time and by order of our spiritual leaders on Era, and about other very important things, through which you can be helpful to us if you would agree to this. That is of correctness because, at least with respect to the aforementioned, we and our intellectual leaders need your teachings and instructions.
By your intellectual leaders, you probably mean spiritual leaders, right?
That is of correctness. These are very wise men and women on our home planet who teach and lead our people as leaders, as well as publicize the advice of the High Council.
Contact Report 173.
We all feel at home in the center, Simia, say, Silver Star Center, which is why we very often spend all of our leisure time there. All of us who are from Era, as well as all those whose homeworlds are different from ours, but who, nevertheless, fulfill their duties here on the Earth and cooperate with us. And for this reason, I would ask you to make it clear to your group members that from now on, they must be prepared every now and then to meet humans at night, in or around the center, who are foreign to the Earth, and in this context, there is also the possibility that light phenomena, etc., will appear if materializations of our allies occur, and so on. But there is nothing to be afraid of or to fear, for as you know, all our allies are also peaceful people who inflict no harm on anyone or on any life form. Moreover, a conversation would be impossible in many cases because many of us and our allies do not master any earthly languages, but only understand these through the use of translators, which may not be in operation as a result of a certain purpose-driven order from our home center that is connected to such a visit. Thus, every difficulty can be avoided if on the part of the group members no attempts of contact are made, neither through any attempts of communication nor through any attempts of physical contact. This must be made completely clear to the group members because such attempts could be misinterpreted, by which means there could be a defensive reaction which, under certain circumstances, would produce rather unpleasant consequences for that particular group member, if he or she would be struck by a paralysis swinging wave or by the force of a stun gun, such things finding their use among our various allies during a fright reaction. So it is fitting that neither attempts of address nor attempts of physical contact take place if there is an encounter, whether the outer appearance of the respective visitor appears to be so very human according to Earth's sense, or whether it appears to be completely foreign to the Earth. It may be that every night they will be visiting among you, because in truth, the entire number of visitors to the center amounts to 2,162 life forms.
That is a right amount of human beings, man, oh man. And if you speak of all, then that means that actually everyone comes, thus the small elves, just as also the largest ones, the middle grade ones, the luminous ones, the ones with luminous eyes, and all others.
That is of correctness. The largest of our allies, Andron, is 5 meters and 26 centimeters tall, 17.3, according to earthly measures, and then there is Danel under him, who is 2 meters and 48 centimeters tall.
Two. The smallest ones are around 70 centimeters tall. 4. And then there are those whose eyes illuminate very brightly, and whose eyes are on the upper forehead of the skull.
I know, but then there are those whose entire bodies fluoresce, or those whose bodies illuminate radiantly, along with those who always practice gymnastics on elevated places, such as on rooftops and trees, etc.
That is of correctness. But in addition to these, there are still other variously formed life forms, but they are all of human genus and species.
Yes, of course, such as one, of whom someone might think that a rubber ball rolls across the ground.
That is of correctness. This is also under them.
Contact Report 176.
The 3 days on Era will be strenuous for you, and you will hardly find any sleep during this time.
You can give me your special food and your special drinks, which expel sleepiness.
Those will be necessary either way. Nevertheless, it is appropriate that you find plenty of sleep.
Contact Report 182.
We already lead our lives in pure logic.
Yet I think that what you can do with your people on Era, that should also be good and inexpensive for the Earth humans. Just the fact that you do a lot of regular duty work on Era between the 6th and 8th hour of the morning, and after that, you can leave and do what you want. I have found that to be very fine and reasonable.
Contact Report 184. Florina's note, the 8th of January, 2004. The Pleiaren and the Druans established intensive contact with each other. In the course of 2 years, negotiations took place over an admission of the Druans into the Pleiaren Federation, which found its fulfillment with the integration of the Druans in February 1985. At the same time, they agreed on the integration of the Druans into the spirit teachings, as this is taught by the Pleiaren. Because the spirit teaching, now referred to as the creation energy teaching, of the Druans are in conformity with the teaching of the Pleiaren, as they are also taught by Billy on the Earth. On the 11th of May, 1985, Quetzal, accompanied by a Druan named Zelton, equals the Thoughtful, appeared to Billy and explained to him that the spirit teaching, which Billy prepares for the Pleiaren spirit leadership, would also be passed on to the Druans in the future for learning purposes. The contact with Zelton, equals the Thoughtful, remained unique, however. Since that time, the Druans have been working with Billy's teachings.
But tell me, you always speak as though you yourself would see it as the Pleiaren do. How does this happen, since you come nevertheless from the Vega and Lyra systems?
The Pleiaren, as you call them, thus our mutual friends, originally came from our systems, assuming that we take as a reference point that period when their ancestors left our systems. Unlike the Earth humans, the direct contact between the emigrants and those who remained on the homeworlds has been maintained and preserved up to the present day, even though much has changed in the whys of life and in the overall development of both poles. Different forms of technology developed, and differences more or less also appeared in the overall evolution. But the preserved connection was and is and will remain such that we see ourselves as a single people, even though we have our homeworlds many light years apart.
I estimate that you are about the same age as Simyase. Is that right?
In terms of age, I am somewhat younger, because since my birth, 314 years have passed.
My question should be whether your average age of your life expectancy is also around 1,000 years, as this is the case with the Pleiaren.
In this regard, the average age with us is set a little lower, namely at 987 years.
Contact Report 211.
Yesterday, we talked about the fact that the 8 agencies, which operate their craft here on Earth, are actually profit gangster organizations, because they only provide their so-called assistance for a fee, whereby they put aside a large portion of the cash donations for their own machinations, such as for compensation, etc. What do you think of this? And do you also have aid agencies for people in need of assistance?
Such aid agencies do exist with us. However, not in relation to our own people, but rather in the context of the assistance that we provide for other peoples who belong to our federation, respectively, who are cared for by our Federation, because they still live in lower levels of development and are not yet in a position to bring themselves to a state of their own assistance.
Interesting. But this does not contradict your directives, which state that you may not interfere in the affairs of foreign worlds and peoples who are not yet developed far enough to be able to master spaceflight.
Concerning the peoples, to whom we can provide assistance, on the one hand, it concerns those who are arranged into our Federation for the purpose of protection, and on the other hand, the fact applies that they know very much about spaceflight technology and, thus, also about the existence of other civilizations on other planets, and they also stand in connection with these. However, they are not yet in a position to manage their own affairs in such a way that they would not have to suffer any need.
Aha, now I understand. But how do you handle the matters around these aid agencies? Are profits also made there, and are relief goods, etc., set aside as compensation for giving assistance, as this is the case with the earthly aid agencies? By the way, I find this to be extremely infamous because I am of the view that assistance should never be handled in any way that involves repayment and profit. In my opinion, an aid agency should consist of people who should not provide assistance in order to be repaid, but who should provide it voluntarily in their leisure time, and, thus, without compensation.
That is also of correctness. What exists on the Earth in the so-called aid agencies must honestly be described as profiteering and as deceiving the donors of the relief goods because, especially with respect to the monetary contributions, respectively the cash donations, a large percentage is set aside for the machinations and the compensations of those members of the organization who do not provide their assistance voluntarily but only for a respectable compensation. All such activity is absolutely unacceptable with us because all our helpers of all aid agencies, which operate both privately as well as for the whole population, work free of charge and use their leisure time for this.
Sometimes, I must confess that I am ashamed when I see how women let themselves be degraded or be humiliated by men. When I see how men treat women like dirt, they beat, prostitute, exploit, and rob them of their personal opinion and freedom. And when I see how the female gender must suffer almost entirely under the rule of the male world, unable to have equal rights, and often being treated like a rag that has all the filth of the world in itself. With you, this is fortunately not so, as it is the case here on the Earth. Anyhow, that is what Simia say taught me. But what about with other peoples? I mean, with other peoples of your Federation, etc.
In our entire Federation, there exist laws that prevent such as it is common on the Earth. Nevertheless, there are foreign civilizations and peoples on foreign worlds who are not allied with us and who exhibit similar conditions of the mentioned form as these are usual on Earth.
Contact Report 213.
Our laws clearly stipulate that if such an act was committed in a drunken state, then it would equal a serious felony, which would also accordingly have to be punished very harshly.
Aha, and I thought that you only had weak alcoholic drinks and no more people who get drunk.
We have very weak alcoholic drinks, but the alcohol content is so low that it can only be measured as a small fraction of a % of alcohol content. Therefore, it is not possible that a person could get drunk on alcohol, not even if they could drink several liters of such a drink. Nevertheless, we still have an old conventional legislation that governs alcoholism, as well as intoxication by alcohol and acts of every kind that are committed in this state, so when one is killed, or a crime is otherwise committed, or when any harm, accident, or misfortune is caused. But this legislation is already more than 5,600 years old and has never had to be put to use since that time when our alcoholic drinks were reduced in their percentages in such a manner as I explained to you. Moreover, the people of our world have learned, and have adjusted themselves to get by without alcoholic drinks, for these are not necessary for a normal and healthy lifestyle. Of course, wine, for example, can have a health-promoting effect. If this is enjoyed with measure and a goal, as this is also the case with other substances, but on our part, we have so aligned our food toward the highest possible health values that we have no longer needed alcoholic drinks for more than 5,600 years, which also eliminated the dangers of evil caused by drunkenness. Bully. Oh, I see. I have actually misunderstood something there. But could I expect that you, and maybe even Pa, would drink a glass of wine with me if I were to find you one? Nothing should prevent that if it is a rare or unique case.
I suppose that you have the freedom to decide for yourselves as to whether or not you want to drink alcohol. Or is there an ordinance that forbids this, thus a ban?
No, that is not the case because the abstention from alcohol is founded on a voluntary basis, so we can very well drink alcohol if we want.
And concerning this, how is it with your Federation members?
Some are inclined towards moderation in strong alcoholic drinks, but others act as we do. But even those who consume alcohol in moderation do not get drunk.
Contact Report 216.
We on the Earth have consulates or embassies in all countries. These have the task of representing citizens who belong to their home countries and foreign countries, and also of performing other duties that result with the host country and the home country, whereby also purely political matters must be settled by these institutions. And in particular, the transmission of messages also falls to the embassies. Here, I ask myself, how is this with you? For you certainly also have similar institutions, through which home country citizens are represented, and through which messages, etc., are transmitted, right? Also, such enterprises are probably necessary in regard to contact with your Federation and the governments, as well as with those who do not belong to your alliance.
That is quite correct. We also have such institutions, of course, but on our own planets. They are not related to the same political framework as the one you know on Earth. Purely planetary institutions in relation to this only have the duties of care, order, and administration, but no political aspects, etc., for our worlds are guided by the spirit leadership of a central form, whereby the institutions mentioned then are the actual executive bodies. Of course, the same are also responsible in certain cases, which are specified very much together with the central spirit leadership, for particular aspects concerning the governments of planets of our Federation, as well as with governments of worlds that are foreign to the Federation. But overall, they are only representatives who exercise their duties on behalf of the central spirit leadership, who, in turn, represents the people's will, which is fathomed in each case by planet-wide votes. Such votes, for which you say elections among yourselves, take place in accordance with proposals, etc., from the people, but also in accordance with the ideas and proposals of the central spirit leadership or with regard to advice from the High Council. In the past, when separation and discord still prevailed among our peoples, institutions of the aforementioned kind also existed, of course, whereby these were likewise exposed to attacks by discontented ones, etc., as this will also be the case on the Earth in the coming time in different countries. Thus, our very distant ancestors had the same problems with discontented ones, with fanatics, terrorists, and assassins, with regard to attacks and destruction, etc., on the aforementioned institutions, whereby also racial hatred, hatred of foreigners, and other degenerate extremism played important roles. In order to protect the institutions, and indeed, also a wide variety of others that had official forms of government, a decision was put into effect, which stipulated that all governmental buildings and administrative buildings etc. be banned from all residential areas and be transferred to uninhabited areas that were exclusively valid for the purpose of the institutions, and that, of course, also found appropriate formations with water features, trees, and all sorts of bushes, flowers, and other plants. Far outside of these institutional systems, so that the residents did not feel trapped and imprisoned, everything was fenced in and was equipped with security equipment, which made it absolutely impossible for an undetected penetration by water, land, or air, as well as for a penetration of an underground kind. In this connection, there were also guards who closely monitored every person and every vehicle or aircraft when allowed entry, driving, or flying into the secured area. Through this, unauthorized ones were prevented from entering the premises and causing harm as well as disaster and destruction and endangering human lives.
What seasons exist on Era?
The same as the ones on your home planet, the Earth.
So spring, summer, autumn, and winter.
That is of correctness.
And the duration of the individual seasons, these also approximately coincide with ours?
Even that is of correctness.
Contact Report 218.
The Pleiadian language we call Sarat, the intercosmic language we designate as Kosan, and the language of the people to whom Manara belongs, we call Jinan, or Deron language.
Contact Report 223.
How is it actually with you when teeth are damaged or are no longer available? And what about dental care and dental hygiene of a personal form?
We maintain our teeth by sound waves. Our teeth as well as dental care and dental hygiene are such that the first teeth, which to my knowledge you call milk teeth, independently cease their functions and fall out, like with the Earth humans. The second renewable teeth are preserved in the best possible way, through authoritative cleaning and through healthy and vigorous care. If these become damaged for some reason, which is extremely rare, then the corresponding teeth are removed in a completely painless manner, after which they grow again independently, which traces back to a genetically engineered process that is given through heredity.
Contact Report 224.
What you say is of correctness. On our part, we always only spoke of the fact that other than on the Earth, no human life forms exist in the Sol system on other planets and on their moons, and indeed, even if we have only used the term life forms alone. But always excluded were those human life forms that, for your understanding, we designate as SOL system foreigners or SOL system outsiders, and who look around on SOL planets and their moons solely for expeditionary purposes.
Contact Report 226.
And as we are talking about technology, the question is whether you can explain how energy is obtained from Era's thermosphere, which, like with us, is around 2,000 degrees hot, if you may explain this.
The fact that we obtain energy from the thermosphere does not fall under secrecy. Concerning the technical details, however, I may give no information officially because according to our directives, this would be an unauthorized intervention in the technological development which would plunge the Earth humans into a catastrophe. Once it is considered that the Earth humans repurpose practically all their valuable technological inventions and achievements in apparatuses and devices in order to cause destruction with these, especially in terms of wars and the destruction of nature, then they would also abuse these insights. If the earthly scientists would have knowledge of the utilization of the thermosphere's energy, then they would construct the thermosphere energy technology into an all-destroying weapon, by which entire countries could be burnt to ashes within seconds. Well, then I would now like to drink another glass of your good wine with you if you still have this beverage.
You probably mean the peach wine. Of course, I still have that here. I'm honestly glad that I may offer you a glass and may drink one together with you.
Contact Report 231.
Then I have a question about the Chinese, who always claim that their whole culture originated from their own people. But Svath once told me that this is not the truth. You told me the same thing, but neither you nor Svath went into it. Both of you have only explained that Chinese culture also contains foreign influences.
That is of correctness. More than 25,000 years ago, the actual ancestors of the Chinese were immigrants from an area beyond your galaxy, which is why the term beyond the sun was used, meaning the galactic central sun in which the galactic black hole moves. The real Ur human beings in China lived more than 2 million years ago. After the immigration of foreigners from beyond the Milky Way, the much later Earth-born natives who lived in the areas where today's China is died out over time. They died as a result of an incurable hereditary disease that spread as they mixed sexually with the new immigrants from beyond the sun. All this knowledge, however, as well as the knowledge of space technology and many other things, was lost, as was the knowledge of the original origins of the immigrants. The immigrants from beyond the sun, that is to say, the actual forefathers of today's Chinese people, already took over many cultural values of the natives from the natives alone, who inhabited the Chinese areas and had created certain small cultures.
Contact Report 232.
But we hoped that with time everything would change for the better. So, on the one hand, in the group, and on the other hand, also in world affairs, that yes, by the peace meditation operated by you, with which since then also 501 million human beings of our peoples on Era, and the 3.02 billion 3,000 to 20,000 human beings from the peoples of our Federation, galaxy-wide, support you.
Contact Report 235.
But what about an earlier statement by you that in the future a spaceship would officially land in the USA? I think that this was explained to me in September 1975, at the 34th or 35th contact.
Yes. To my knowledge, this explanation was given to you at the 35th contact meeting with my daughter Simia Se on September 16, 1975. In addition, I may explain to you, in the expansion of the explanation at that time, that these interests have changed thoroughly. For our part, we were able to locate the group that would have come to Earth in the future and would have made official contact with the Earth humans in America. In the knowledge of the true, unpeaceful and arrogant machinations and all other evils, which prevail in America and influence the whole world negatively, we informed those who were intended for the official establishment of contact with the terrestrial humans in America, recognized by foresight. After taking note of our information, however, that group decided not to carry out this enterprise, although it had already been decided. Consequently, this planned event does not take place because America is not yet mature enough in any wise for such contacts, but this does not preclude other strangers from coming to Earth and seeking contact.
And were the members of this group belonging to you or your Federation?
No, in no wise. They are at home beyond the sun, in the same star region where the Japanese and Chinese originally also had their original homes.
Interesting. And by beyond the sun, as I found out some time ago, you do not mean our sun, Sol, but the central sun of our galaxy, our Milky Way. Is that right?
That corresponds to the circumstances.
Although I have often declared that you live on Era according to the laws of polygamy, the question is always raised whether you would not have any problems with that.
The conditions in this respect are completely different from those on the Earth. In contrast to the women of the earth, our female powers know no jealousy and no egoism. They are unfamiliar with quarrelsomeness, and they are also aware of all the advantages that are peculiar to them in that they live in an association of several female partners and can afford mutual assistance in every respect. But they are also aware of all the advantages they enjoy by having only one spouse responsible for them, whom they are devoted to in common. Through polygamy, however, it is also given and guaranteed that it never appears that a man has a secret lover, as in monogamy it very often appears in the earth-human sense, which leads to quarrels and assaults and destroys marriages and families, because the women of the earth-humans are not aware and not big enough to grant to the man the natural creational right of polygamy allocated to him. The conditions in this respect can be compared with ours, which can look back on a polygamy tradition of many millions of years. However, we have different terms for the marriage of one man and several women. For us, the term monogamy always prevails, even if the man is married to several women. The man is always in complete union with a woman, so they are always one and therefore one. But this refers to any case of a woman who lives in an alliance with a man who is married to several women. Our law says that the marriage covenant is based on a marital relationship between a man and a woman who marry together and form a covenant in order to form a unity of two.
Contact Report 236.
You are not the only one who can enjoy and be refreshed by the most diverse styles of music. Even as you love classical music, rock, country, truck songs, folk songs, pop, marching music, rap, soul, spirituals, gospel, and our music, as well as Oriental, Middle Eastern, and Far Eastern music and rhythms of the natives, I, too, am just as versatile and have no fixed boundaries in reference to the style and direction of this very pleasing, loosening, and profound muse. We know of and have stored more than 3.7 million languages in our entire field of knowledge and understanding.
Contact Report 237.
When Nokadimion returned from the Arahat Athersata level to the material world in his time, he found conditions on the planets that were significant for his peoples that were quite devilishly similar to the political conditions that prevail on the Earth today. The countries had degenerated into monarchies and dictatorships and other unfair regimes. Many countries fought each other, murdered and enslaved, tortured and exploited. Nokadimion did not take long to establish a multinational peacekeeping force, which was built in such a manner that each responsible country maintained an armed permanent army of a certain strength of combat-capable men, at its own expense, which was only intended to create and maintain peace in combat-capable form on all worlds. However, each army of a country was only just large enough to ward off an attacking enemy, but no revolution or war of aggression could be waged against another state. The total number of combat-capable men of all armies of a planet amounted to 3 million men, distributed on all countries involved, which were individually, however, trained and armed according to a uniform system. These multinational peace combat troops were under the direct command of the Multinational Army Command. If an unrest, revolution, or fratricidal war broke out somewhere in one country, or if one country attacked another, the red button was pressed on the multinational army leadership. This meant that the command was issued immediately, that so many men of the multinational peace combat force appeared together at the scene of the revolutionary or belligerent events, within 24 hours and in one fell swoop, in sophisticated coordination, and put an end to every revolution and every war within a few hours by force of arms, in completely logical consequence of the application of the law of self-defense.
What you tell me is known to me, and I know that peace was actually created through this method at that time. But in the course of time, people softened and abolished the army of multinational form. As soon as wars broke out again over the worlds, and power-hungry people rose into the governments. This then lasted for tens of thousands of years before the same system was introduced again 52,000 years ago with the multinational peacekeeping troops. Then it lasted 67 years, after which there really was peace actually prevailed everywhere again, which has been maintained until today, not least because of the multinational peacekeeping troops, which have been an integral part of our entire Federation ever since. Weapons may only be manufactured for this troop and for leisure purposes, whereby, however, the hunting and killing of animals of all kinds is forbidden, as this, unfortunately, does not apply on the Earth. Animals may only be shot in our Federation in self-defense or in their form that impairs the environment. The so-called illegal black market or private trade with weapons of any kind known to you is not permitted. But every person has the granted right to possess and use one or more weapons in a legal form, if the weapons are registered in a central computer and checked for their respective individual characteristics and features, whereby it can be proven at any time where and when and whose weapon was used. In addition, it is so important to us that any weapon can only be used by the owner, as their personal swinging wave is necessary to use the weapon at all. Maybe I could help you with your questions and the rest.
No, unfortunately not, because they are mathematical question formulas of that kind, which should reach out into higher levels and which in my opinion can only be handled by Ta or Quetzal. Of course, there are at least 29,000 spirit guides in your Federation who are capable of doing so. But I do not know who I could commission or ask, because I do not know them personally.
Contact Report 238.
All the peoples of our Federation are committed to respecting the laws of nature and to allowing natural climatic processes, etc., to run their course. We do not influence the weather in the form that we would design it according to our personal desires. We only intervene where there are threats to land, plants, and human and animal life, as you explained earlier.
That almost sounds like Scrill, but surely there's no connection to the dimension from which the supposed dimension changers come. Those brutal and bestial Skrills that sometimes attack humans in their greed for sex.
The term Scrill means Ausartung, to get very badly out of the good human nature.
Aha, then they are thus called the Ausgearteten.
This is so, but we also call them dimension changers, as you already mentioned. But the term Scrill means Ausgartet only for us, because truthfully the Skrills call themselves Scrill, which means dimension changer in their language.
Without a doubt, these Skrills are human beings, even if they are completely vicious, brutal, and bestial, and incredibly sex-hungry, males as well as females. The horror of these differently dimensioned beings is only that they are completely Ausgeartet and capable of switching from their dimension to other dimensions, whereby they then attack and rape human beings in the other dimensions. It is a good thing that this does not happen very often, and that human beings of other dimensions, such as our dimension, can only clear and pave the way for these Skrills through psychological misconduct. By this, I mean that these Skrills can only penetrate into other dimensions and work there if other human beings of this dimension clear the way for them by self-destructively driving their psyche to malfunction, and thus psychical collapse. I know all this from Quetzal, who also explained to me that you only know about it because some of your scientists once succeeded in connecting with these Skrills and experiencing their way of life and all the trimmings. When Nocademian built up his robot armies and his android armies in his time, he did so in a manner that still seems utopian to today's Earth human, because he built a multi-duplicator for this purpose, which multiplied everything he programmed with an atomic blueprint, etc., infinitely many times, in absolute unison. Thus Nocademion actually only needed to construct one copy of each type of robot, as well as one copy of the androids, after which he could multiply them in infinite numbers using the multi-duplicator. Even the tiniest atomic detail of the final product resembled the prototype, which served only as a perfect model. In fact, such a multi-duplicator is a giant apparatus that produces clones. In other words, one could also say that it is a copier or duplicator that provides an exact copy of the original, not only the externally visible, but also the interior, down to the last and finest atomic structure. The question is whether you also have such multi-duplicators, which are based on electrons, which are based on their operation with regard to the required energies, but also with regard to the required matter for the multi-duplications to be generated. If I remember correctly, then the unexhaustible cosmic electron seas are tapped in order to transform and form the necessary matter from the electrons, from which then the templates programmed by atomic images receive their material form and are materially duplicated.
This wonderful invention of Nocodemion has remained with us, even if today everything has been changed and renewed to such an extent, precisely in accordance with the inevitable progress that nothing points to its origin. We have been producing all necessary building materials of all kinds, machines, robotic tools, androids, and also medicines and food, etc., in this form for thousands of years by duplicating them.
But you also have gardens, orchards, vegetable gardens, etc., as I know.
Certainly. What we can gain from nature in a natural wise. We work out together with nature in a natural way, but always in such a manner that neither nature nor the planet nor the fauna or flora suffer any damage.
You really breed meat as just the product you need, so you never have to kill an animal life form.
That is correct, but we do not only produce meat from cell tissue by breeding, but also from our multipliers. Other things also belong to it.
Why is my name not correct?
According to the word value, your name is completely correct.
Well, yes. I suppose you also make all the metals with the multi-duplicators. Because if I remember correctly, Simia told me in 1975 or 1976 that you were extracting the basic materials for metal production from the realms of the planets, etc., in order to convert them, which would result in lead first, and then all the pure metals or alloys required. At that time, I did not think about it any further, but in the meantime, the idea came to me that you would get the necessary raw materials for certain metals or alloys directly through the multi-duplicators, in order to process them in cold processes in order to create special alloys from them. Perhaps, I could imagine, you get the ready-made metals and alloys directly from the multi-duplicators, which duplicate all matter in cold processes according to given atomic image patterns. Of course, a multi-duplicator could also be called a cold processor, even if the human being on the Earth may misinterpret this, because for them, a processor is something else, namely a central part of a data processing system, which contains the arithmetic unit and the control unit. Do you call the apparatus a multi-cold duplicator in your own language?
The meaning of your word roughly corresponds to our name. In any case, everyone here would understand the meaning of your newly created term. For our part, we have a community of independent worlds, or even a union of sovereign worlds, which we call a federation, as it is in and of itself the case on the Earth.
Contact Report 239.
So, my friend, and now I long for a good drink. Although I already drank a small glass tonight, I still feel like a second one. If I may perhaps also offer one to you, I would be tremendously pleased. It is a peach wine with very low alcohol content, but which I can still drink without difficulties, without it affecting me somehow. What do you think, Pata?
I am not entirely at ease with your offer because, as you know, we only drink alcohol-like drinks, but not alcoholic drinks. Therefore, I do not know whether the drink would be good for me.
It will surely agree with you because if I can drink it, in spite of my many medicines without it harming me somewhat, then it certainly will not harm you in any wise. The wine only has 9% alcohol by volume, which is as good as nothing. You just have to drink the wine slowly and in small sips and over longer periods of time. You may need 20 or 30 minutes to do it calmly.
Since you are so sure, and because I have full confidence in you, I would gladly like to do this once and drink a glass of this wine with you. Ah, this is really very good, and it is also refreshing. This music that you are playing there, it has a lot of resemblance with our music.
It is the Chorus of the Hebrew Slaves from Nabucco by Giuseppe Verdi.
It is well known to me, like also many other melodies that you are playing.
Contact Report 241.
I would desire a sip of peach wine if I could ask for it.
But certainly that is not a question. Wait. Here, a glass for you and one for me. Now I will get the wine, which I put outside to chill, because I myself drink a glass every now and then, if I feel like it. Well, here I am again. If you allow me, I will pour it right away. You know, I thought to myself that you would certainly like to have some bottles of this wine. That is why I also provided a box of 6 that you can take with you. How did the wine taste with Quetzal, by the way? But now cheers.
For the good, just refreshing. Well, when Quetzal heard from me that I had tested the wine together with you, found it to be very good, and received another bottle from you as a gift, he could no longer be deterred from tasting the bottle I had brought with me to him.
A huge tasting. A whole bottle like that, I would like to say. And did he find the wine as good as we did?
Certainly. He found it as refreshing as we did. Just take French cuisine as an example, whose composition is often absolutely inedible.
I know that when I think of rice casimir, which is seasoned with pineapple, or other dishes where meat dishes are mixed with berries and fruits or seasoned, then I feel sick.
The nausea also rises in me when I think about it.
Several years ago, you were still talking about the fact that, towards the end of the 20th century, Earth would be visited by extraterrestrial people, who would then officially make contact with Earth humans. Through all sorts of bad machinations of Earth humans, however, it then emerged that this extraterrestrial visit would no longer take place, and therefore no such contact would take place. Are the facts today still as they were when you told me that such a contact had no chance anymore?
Things have changed fundamentally again in the meantime, by all that has changed in the meantime in political form in many countries of Earth. A lot of positive things have come about, and the prospects for such a contact have increased by a great deal, so that the old plan can come true again under certain circumstances, whereby we ourselves or any other forces from our Federation have no connection whatsoever to those human beings who are supposed to establish official contacts with terrestrial people and whose knowledge and ability in every respect will not yet have developed to such an extent that they understand all things that are peculiar to us in terms of knowledge. They will also not yet be able to grasp our dimension in which we live and exist. And with regard to the teaching of the Spirit and creation and their laws and commandments, they will also not be developed according to our state. If the contact with these alien beings one day comes about in official form, but this is still questionable, then this means for us and all our allies that we then withdraw and keep away from Earth in every form, whereby we will then only maintain telepathic contacts to you. If the mentioned contacts actually take place, but what is really questionable for the next decades, then Earth humans will enter into connections and alliances with Earth strangers, into which we may interfere according to our laws in no case and under no circumstances. This means that we must then withdraw into our dimension and no longer be active on Earth.
Then it is certain that these contacts with aliens will take place?
At present, the overall situation points to this, but the next 6 to 8 years can again change a lot, because Earthman is so unstable and fickle that in the long run, everything always floats in the air and in the unknown.
Another question concerning the events against the year 2000. when aliens are supposed to approach the terrestrial people. Is this something that has already been determined? And if so, how will it happen?
My explanation already went to the effect that such an event will only take place if the overall situation of earthly politics and the efforts of all human beings develop in such a way that such an event can occur. Even if at present everything points to the fact that what has been said could take place, it is in no way certain that what is positive on Earth and among terrestrial human beings will actually take place in such a way that the event can take place. The fickleness of Earth humans is simply so great that not much can be predicted for a nearer or later future. In order to be able to give such predictions of the future in precise form, we would need the effort of looking at the future. But we don't want to do these, for which you know the reasons. If it can be avoided, then we refrain from this kind of exploration of the future.
Of course. Can you tell me? However, whether human beings from otherworldly worlds will otherwise visit Earth in such a way that they will be recognized by terrestrial humans, without the aliens being harassed by authorities or the military or by any madmen or even endangered their freedom or their lives. Is it therefore possible that even before the year 2000 alien astronauts will come to Earth, with whom Earthlings will perhaps be able to make secret contact, as is the case with you in a similar or identical form? I mean between you and me?
Such occurrences could very well occur both in this century and in the next. This form of alien appearance is more possible than that of official contacts with authorities and the military. Space travelers are usually extremely cautious and take certain protective measures into account if they do not make themselves known officially.
Doesn't that contradict what you said a few minutes ago, that possibly even before the year 2000 foreigners could get in touch with earthly authorities, etc.?
No, this is not the case, because I explained clearly that this would only be the case if the overall situation on Earth would change in such a way that such an event could become possible. Even though a lot of positive things are happening at the moment, this is by no means a guarantee that people on Earth will continue to do so. It can very well be that everything will soon be negative again because Earthman is just unsteady and fickle. However, this has nothing to do with the fact that non-earthly people from other worlds cannot nevertheless land on Earth in this form in a secret way and move among Earth humans without being recognized, or that they are only recognized by a few, who, however, remain silent about it responsibly until the space travelers have left Earth again, so that they cannot be hugged by madmen, authorities, and the military, etc. It will be more difficult for all those who crash or are forced to make an emergency landing due to an accident of their spacecraft, because their technology does not yet correspond to the form that such incidents would no longer occur. Such crashes and emergency landings have occurred on Earth since ancient times, and will continue to occur in the future, albeit very rarely. But this must always be reckoned with, especially for spacecrafts whose technology has not yet been developed in such a way that no more damage can occur. The crews of such crashing spacecraft usually suffer death, while there is a high chance of survival during emergency landings. The crews of such emergency landed spacecrafts, however, are usually helpless and are not able to carry out the necessary repairs on their missiles, which makes them planet-bound in the world where they crash. The rule is also that they cannot survive or that they are captured in the most mild case, etc. When they crash on worlds whose inhabitants are still barbaric, such as the inhabitants of Earth. Of course, there are many other barbaric humanities on foreign planets whose inhabitants simply kill crashed space travelers or often worship them as gods and then do not let them leave again as such.